I was faced with a choice which I never should have had.
She was crying like I had never heard a woman cry before in my life.
And I just cried for weeks and weeks. Everything reminded me of a baby.
And I kept trying to get up from the table and look to see what was in that jar.
I was dealing with the loss of my unborn child and I didn't even know it.
I believe that my life was spared that night just so that I could be here right now and say abortion hurts women.
Whisper, be silent no more.
Welcome to Faces of Abortion. I'm your host, Cindy Collins, and again I'm with my co-host, Alan Parker, President of the Justice Foundation. Alan, we have a great show today with David B. Wright talking about the power of prayer. And we'll also be hearing about the National Helpline for Abortion Recovery, and a little bit from one of the staff members on the helpline.
Oh, I think that's incredible, because whenever I speak around the country, I often say that the two greatest weapons that we have in the pro-life movement today are concentrated, persistent prayer and the power of women's testimonies. In fact, it was the power of women's testimonies that started Operation Outcry when the Lord told us we needed to collect these testimonies and let the world know how painful and devastating abortion is.
That's right, Alan. And now let's listen to David B. Wright on the power of prayer in his own words.
My name is David B. Wright, and I am very blessed to serve as the National Director of a ministry called 40 Days for Life. And 40 Days for Life began very humbly. It started literally with 4 people praying around an old wooden table for 1 hour, asking God to show us what can we do to help to save lives, to help to impact those who have been affected by abortion. And during that hour of prayer, He really put on our hearts the time frame of 40 days, because throughout biblical history, we see the incredible significance of 40-day time frames where God has transformed lives, He's transformed nations, and even the entire world. And when we look at the harm of abortion in our world today, we realize we need some transformation. So the 3 things as we prayed that we felt that we needed to do for 40 days, first was to recognize that with God, all things are possible. With man, ending abortion is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. So we felt we needed to pray and fast is the first thing. Prayer, because we know that I can do all things in Christ who strengthens us, but fasting because some demons are only driven out by prayer and fasting. So we felt that was important. The second thing that we felt we needed to do was to hold a constant, peaceful, 40-day-long prayer vigil outside of a local abortion facility or Planned Parenthood office, knowing that where 2 or more are gathered in our Lord's name, He's present in our midst. And where is His presence more urgently needed than in a place of such hopelessness and despair that is an abortion facility? Also, by going there into that public right-of-way, as uncomfortable as that is, our presence can awaken the conscience of a community as people realize abortion affects our hometown, right where we live. But the most important reason we go there is because sometimes our presence can help a mother at that most vulnerable time when she's being pressured by so many forces around her. It can help her to change her mind and not go through the abortion and choose life, and we've seen that time and time again. So prayer and fasting, peaceful vigil, and the third thing, as we prayed for an hour, we felt led to do, was grassroots community outreach, because the most powerful way that we can spread this message of the sanctity of human life is through word of mouth, talking to friends and to family and to fellow believers. So at the end of that hour of prayer, that was what birthed what became the first 40 Days for Life campaign. And initially, we did one campaign in College Station, Texas, and we saw abortions reduced by 28% in that community. And we also saw many people who had had past abortions who were able to come out and share their story and begin the healing process. And that was an unexpected blessing that we never thought we would see. But from there, from that initial community, it began to spread to other cities. And to date now, we've seen national and eventually internationally coordinated 40 Days for Life campaigns conducted in 501 cities across all 50 American states and now 19 other countries. So there have been campaigns in Uganda, there have been campaigns in England, there have been campaigns in Australia. There was recently a campaign in the heart of Moscow, Russia, and God is doing amazing things. More than 500,000 people have participated in 40 Days for Life campaigns, and to date we've seen over 7,400 babies' lives saved from abortion. But it's not only the babies, it's also the mothers who have been spared from a lifetime of regrets, the fathers, the families that would have been affected. Two other blessings that we never expected. To date, we've now seen 29 abortion facilities that, following a 40 Days for Life campaign outside its doors, have completely shut down and gone out of business. And that is a huge blessing, because certainly no more children will die there, no more women will cry there. And the most unexpected blessing was the 80 abortion workers to date that we have seen who have had conversions and completely left their work in the abortion business. We hear names like Abby Johnson and Ramona Trevino and Sue Thayer and so many others who have worked, some of them at the highest levels, running abortion facilities, who have had complete changes of heart. Many of them have given their lives to the Lord and begun anew. And that's how we know that this is not our work. This is God's work, because we could not do those things. But God in His infinite mercy and His grace can do those things. He can change hearts and minds. One of the most profound experiences I had through 40 Days for Life, of the 7,400 lives that have been saved, at this point I've only met 3 of those children. And the second one was one that really profoundly touched me. The leader of the 40 Days for Life campaign in La Puente, California, which is a suburb in East LA, her name is Yvonne Viramontes. She called and said, "David, we've done 5 40 Days for Life campaigns, and we've never known if it was making a huge difference or not. Our vigil is way outside of the abortion facility, which is set around in the back of this office park, and so we couldn't even see the door." But she said, "We just got word that the abortionists shut the business down, abruptly left town overnight. It's closed down." And she said, "Would you and Sean Carney, my partner in 40 Days for Life, will you fly out here and praise God for what He's done? We're going to have a rally." And I said I wouldn't miss that. So we got on the airplane to fly out to LA, and we were going to have to come back that same night on a red eye. And on the way, I asked Sean, "What's going to be the biggest blessing?" I said, "I think it's going to be seeing that facility closed and knowing no more babies will perish there, no more women will be wounded." And Sean said, No, I think it's going to be seeing the eyes of the people and knowing that God heard their prayers after 5 seasons of 40 days of prayer and fasting and vigil and outreach, knowing that their prayers were answered. When we got there, both of those were blessings. But the biggest blessing was when Yvonne pulled us aside at the end of the rally and she said, "I just had to introduce you, they're here." And she took us to meet 4 people. One was a tiny newborn baby. She was being held by her teenage mother. Next to her was the baby's grandmother, and next to her the baby's great-grandmother. So 4 generations, and they told us their story. They told us that when that baby was in the womb and the mother was pregnant, it was a crisis situation. She felt pressured, and she went to her mother and said, "I need to have an abortion. I don't know what else to do." And her mother said, "I don't want you to have an abortion." But the mother knew nothing about pregnancy help centers, knew no other alternative, and reluctantly took her daughter that day to the abortion center. When they pulled into the parking lot, they went past the 40 Days for Life people praying, and they pulled into the back, and the girl started to cry in the back seat, covering her ears, and said, "Mom, why are those people praying so loud? It's like they're screaming at me inside the car." And her mom said, "They're praying silently. What are you talking about?" She said, "Maybe that's God trying to tell you something." And the girl, through her tears, said, "I wish God would tell me." And her mother said, "Those tears may be God's message to you." That was all it took, and the girl jumped out of the car, went with her mother over to those volunteers who helped her throughout her pregnancy and even after she gave birth to her baby that she chose not to abort. And that day, outside of that abortion facility that was now out of business, closed down, where her baby had been scheduled to be aborted, I got to have the opportunity to hold little baby Leah in my arms. And as I held her and realized, if it were not for people praying, if it were not for people answering the call, if it were not for people willing to be inconvenienced, little Leah would not be alive today. And that moment was so worthwhile to me. And my message to anybody involved in this movement, or maybe considering getting involved in this movement, is you too can make a life-saving difference. You too can choose life if you are in a crisis pregnancy situation. If you're not in a crisis pregnancy situation, you can help with efforts that can assist somebody in that situation. And you too one day may have the opportunity to hold in your arms a little girl or a little boy made in God's image and likeness, and know how incredibly worth it is. So I just encourage you to pray and ask God to show you what you can do. Maybe it's to get involved in a 40 Days for Life. Maybe it's to get involved in a pregnancy help center. Maybe it's to get involved in post-abortion healing for yourself or for others. But find your place, get involved, and let us not grow weary in doing good, because in Galatians we're told, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." And that's a message we can all take to heart. Press on in this work, and God will work through this effort to save more lives, change more hearts, and impact eternal souls.
Welcome back to Faces of Abortion. You've just listened to David B. Wright, the founder of 40 Days for Life, talk about the power of prayer, the importance of praying for the end of abortion. But Alan, you know, I also heard about the power of prayer, literally, of our prayers going where our feet may not be able to go, and of those prayers even going into places, into the hearts of those that work inside of the abortion facilities, those that may be inside, and those prayers bringing even the women out, and instead of choosing abortion, they choose life.
It does. I heard David speak recently, and over 7,000 children that they know of have been saved from death in the abortion clinics through the peaceful, prayerful presence of God's people outside those abortion facilities. And so I urge everybody to be a part of 40 Days for Life. It's sustained, powerful, peaceful presence of the Lord, and it changes hearts. And it, I believe, also pleases God tremendously to see His children standing for life. He loves justice. He loves righteousness. And when we do justice, He is pleased.
He really is, and He's pleased in the humility of prayer also. I know just as we take things out of our hands and place them in His hands, what seems impossible becomes possible through prayer. And everybody can take a part in ending abortion, reaching the brokenhearted, and even in these last days, which we are saying of the end of abortion, of those that have been caught in the web of the abortion industry, bringing them out also, like Abby Johnson, who came out because of the 40 Days for Life prayer movement.
Yeah, one year she was Planned Parenthood's Employee of the Year. The next year she was on the pro-life side, and I think even standing in front of clinics praying herself. I'm not sure if all that happened in a year, but she was pro-life the next year. So prayer changes things. Prayer can change your life. It can change the life of the nation. And I urge you to cry out to God for salvation, cry out to God for deliverance, cry out to God for help right now. If you're in a crisis pregnancy, He will answer those prayers. And you can call our helpline for abortion recovery. You can call the helpline and we'll get you help if you're pregnant. And most of all, cry out to God for salvation today if you have not been born again, have not given your life to the Lord. If you've not surrendered to Him, today is the day of salvation. Pray that prayer to God today.
Welcome back to Faces of Abortion. Today we have a very special in-studio guest, Mary Lee Mason, who's on staff with the National Helpline for Abortion Recovery. Welcome, Mary Lee.
Thank you, Cindy.
We're so excited to have you here today to share a little bit about the National Helpline, the work that the Helpline does in helping women and men that call in that are hurting from the pain of abortion, whether it be yesterday that they had the abortion or it's been 10 or 20 years. It's a safe place, a first point of contact for someone to call and to find healing, hope, and help. Mary Lee, I'd like for you to share a little bit about your work with the Helpline and maybe even take us through also what someone can expect when they call the Helpline.
Sure, Cindy. It just amazes me how this show has touched so many people. And it's such an honor and privilege to answer the phone for the National Helpline. When anybody calls, we have girls, guys, anybody. When they call, the first thing we share our testimony with them. All of us have had an abortion and have found healing on the Helpline. And so when we share a testimony, sometimes they even say, "You're the first person I've talked to who's had an abortion, and thank you for taking my call." So it's just amazing how we can reach out to them. And then they share their story with us. And Cindy, some of these girls are calling the day after their abortion and some a week after. And we're there to support them, and then we're there to provide help. And we actually refer them to their local abortion recovery group.
I know, Mary Lee, that's so important, is like both of us have found in our own recovery and healing from abortion, that it's important to begin speaking about that, not to allow that pain to be stuffed, to be hidden down. As we've found out in our own recovery and then helping others, we began to connect the dots of guilt, what other?
Shame, the guilt and the shame. And as they keep it a secret, it builds, it gets worse and worse each year. So what I'm finding is these girls, as soon as they have their abortion and then they reach out for help, and if we can get them into an abortion recovery program sooner, the sooner they're going to get that healing.
Yes, we've seen that, and I know we both felt, and those other women that we've talked to, we've felt we're the only one that has been going through that pain, and then we find, because there have been millions upon millions and millions of women that have had abortions in our nation, including those like myself that have had multiple abortions, that there has to be a place where we can cry out for help, which the National Helpline is a great place. I know, talked to women that have thought about suicide even. And this is a great place to speak to somebody who truly understands and can hold that confidentially. And then, like you said, find help in your local area for somebody to talk to.
And Cindy, also, I would like to mention that we have men who call the helpline too. I've answered many calls with a man calling saying either my girlfriend just had an abortion and I didn't want her to, and they have that same pain and they go through the same thing. And then also, guys call us when their girlfriend's about ready to have an abortion and they don't want them to have an abortion, and they cry out for help. And we're able to send them to the local pregnancy center for help.
That's so good, Mary Lee, because I know that number is 1-866-482-LIFE. Again, that's 1-866-482-LIFE.